tonight's meeting of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club. We are your hosts this evening. I'm Tobias and this is Will. Together we have a number of curious and exciting topics to share with you.
As attendees of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club, you are all now members, provided you adhere to our philosophy.
Ex Curiositas Scientia.
We pledge to learn without prejudice in pursuit of our mutual goal, perpetual knowledgeship. We admit that it is impossible to know everything about anything, and thus we remain perpetually curious and perpetually novice.
This is our flag and our mascot, Franklin. The lightning bolt represents the receipt of knowledge, the enlightenment of illumination, the resonance of truths understood. It awakens and excites us and makes us hungry for more. Curiosity Club is made merrier by our fellow artisans at Fort George Brewery in Astoria, Oregon. And now, let's give a warm Curiosity Club welcome to Mitsuhiro Yamazaki, International Business Development Officer.
When I turn on my microphone. Test. Is it close enough? Yeah. Is it loud enough or too loud? All right, so I was told to stand here, and I wore my boots so that I have a height gain here, and I'm on the camera, and if I act funny, it's because I'm contained within the speakers, and if I go in front of it, it's gonna go loud, so I'm gonna stay input. So today I would like to talk about the relationship between beloved Portland and Oregon and my home country, Japan. And it's interesting to say that it's a long history. It's a peculiar relationship, and it's a growing relationship. And I get to play between that two continents for my job. And there are more of the relationships than what you may have heard from local media, international media for the last couple, maybe several years. And I would like to touch on that, and I'd like to focus on what I feel is the most interesting part of Oregon-Japan relationship. And as you see, the front page is government issued. It's from PDC. I have no control over design, but I'm always told that I should start with a nice picture. I have more pictures, series of them, that tells stories of what's happening today between the two countries, or two continents, and then what's going on and what had gone on in the past. And I'll touch on a few funny things here and there. And I'm doing this because I wanted to tell the story, but also I like free beer. How many of you have been to Curiosity Club before? About 80%. I'll tell you, I won't be the best speaker, but I'll tell you I won't be the worst, because I haven't been to the worst one yet. But I trust the quality and the curation of the team here, and it will be fun. Hi, Tom. Hey, Dan. There are seats available. All right. So here it goes. So Portland is big in Japan. Who knew? Good? Kind of? Yes? It is probably the most mentioned term geography in Japan today. Portland is bigger than Portland. Portland is bigger than New York City in media in Japan. Portland has become a synonym for quality, weirdness, rain, bicycle, urban planning, economic development, many things. But why? And I'll give you some portion of why Portland has become big in Japan. It may be the scenery. It may be the nature. It may be there's just nice town. It's clean air because of rain. If it didn't rain, it would just be like LA. But it may be the coffee. Yes, we are one of the homes of third wave coffee, and a lot of people in Japan are catching on now that, yeah, it's the good coffee. It's better than Starbucks. Don't know if it's true, but yes, we're known for coffee today. It may be the riders. It may be the bicycle. It may be the unipiper. Who knows? But a lot of people have learned about our bike scenes. Funny enough, those pictures, I searched online, using Google, typing Portland in Japanese letters. And I get these. I'm not lying. Or it may be the urban planning. We have one of the nicer urban development downtown in the country, and I was told by different medias and people in Japan that Portland is the best place to live in the world. I know many of you don't think so, but it may be. It's up to the audience, just like art. Or it may be the food scene. What about the donuts? Did you know Blue Star Donuts may have more than 6 locations in Japan soon? Crazy. One of the biggest and the busiest success, and the busiest pancake shops in Japan is called The Original. It is true. It's from Southwest Portland. And later, there was a bigger wave of pancake shop. It's called Slappy Cakes. And they were busy when I visited. It's in the busiest part of Tokyo, downtown Tokyo, in a kind of a mid-rise building on the 8th floor. And Slappy Cakes sits amongst maybe a dozen other restaurants, gourmet-type restaurants, on that floor of this department store. And they have the longest line at lunch. True story. For some reasons, people in Japan love Ace Hotel. So on any given day, if you go there, maybe between 9 and 11 a.m., I promise you will see a Japanese person in a lounge, clicking away, trying to check, and then they may be looking at one of these guidebooks, you know. And by the way, I brought my collection of Portland-related Japanese literatures, so I have this Popeye. It's a fashion magazine. It's monthly. They have over 200,000 circulation every single month, and they dedicated whole months about Portland. Entire months, Portland. It has Alberta, Mississippi, you name it. It's there. The many others, and you can feel free to browse through. And then just the quality of life in general. So talk about maybe the farmers market. And if you go during the summer to the farmers market on PSU campus, I promise you will see at least 5 Japanese people. And maybe 5 other lookalikes. I have been privileged to introduce the urban planning processes and best practices of Portland to Japan as part of our export initiative, which started in 2012. And I've been selling it for the last 4 years or so, and we have some success, but it wasn't so easy. So first time we went there, and actually Craig Briscoe was part of the earlier team here, and he's still an architect, which is great. He didn't quit that job. Maybe he will soon. But it's a story to tell. It's a long story, right? Because it took nearly 40 years for, back then in 70s, Portland was a dirty city. Willamette River was the dirtiest water quality of any major river in the US. And it took a state level and the city level, county level, metro level initiative and leadership to turn it around. And I tell that story over and over. But when we first landed in Tokyo to do this event, I had to work with a lot of people who worked on it. So Tom Hughes from the Metro, he's the head of the Metro government. I had an environmental engineer firm called GlueMac, where Craig used to work. He has a better job today, by the way. Charles Kelly from ZGF, which is the largest architectural firm in Portland, and they ranked #1 amongst top architectural firms in the US today, voted by American Institution of Architects, AIA. And when we do events anywhere, even today, we get packed house like this. Crazy story. I don't want to touch on and bore you with all that history of how Portland became a green city. You live in it, so I don't want to give you all that facts. But what we do when I sell that service is to come up with curated team who are needed by the client's project, and then always conduct this community design workshop to really drum up people's good ideas and then design around those good ideas so that we can come up with kind of a customized prototype of that area by the people. And we have this project earlier days in 2013, 2014 worked on called Kashiwanoha Smart City Project. And it's, maybe 15-acre urban plan redevelopment site. It was a golf course. Now it has a transit line going through and has maybe today 3,000, 4,000 people living in it. But because it was residentially driven, transit-oriented development, a lot of people just work outside of this area, and during the day it was vacant. That was the dilemma for the developers. And developers sought us after, and then we struck a deal and we helped them out by having the workshop and having a foresight of what it takes to make this area more vital, active, and easier to do business. So we basically add a lot of offices and work areas in the plan and then make it more attractive for local people to just stroll around, having a ground floor retail, wider sidewalks, more coffee shops, third places, community gathering spaces, all of the things. It took about a year and a half to really get to that level. So we have been doing that for a few years. We have maybe 6 active projects designed by Portlanders in Japan today. And that resulted into, I would say about $1.5 million into Portland economy. And a lot of people have traveled to Japan, professional level, not the tourists, but professional level. That changes the dynamic of our urban planning and architecture scenes because many had not done any projects in Japan. Which is funny because Japan is the 3rd largest nation by economic size, and it's the closest ally to the United States for the last 50 or so years. And none of our architects had worked in Japan. Think about that. Why? We've also helped local makers, the crafty people, the designers, maybe athletic gear companies, group them together and then have their own trade show. Instead of going to a trade show and get buried by tens of thousands of companies, they can have their own trade show hosted or organized by Portland Development Commission and their allies. Business Oregon, our state partner, have also helped us big time really organizing and then kind of collaborating around how we make it better every year. So we've done 3 times already. Earlier this year, our 3rd one, we've made over $20,000 in 3 days by these companies. And we had over 4,000 people visit to this venue. It's a big deal. Again, Portland is a big deal. And now, one of our biggest partners, or 2 of them, Travel Portland and Travel Oregon, has shifted the gear up to the 5th and then really spent a lot of money promoting Portland as destination. And I wanted to show you their promotional video, if I can get there. And hopefully the sound will work. It's called Old MacDonald. You can see that alphabet on the left-hand side corner. Old MacDonald came from the word Portland, spelled in Japanese phonetics, and then respelled out in the Roman characters in Japanese phonetics, and then flip it backward, and then read it. Old MacDonald. And they came up with an awesome campaign created by Wyden Kennedy, not only in Portland, but also in Tokyo. So here it goes. The song is by Ages and Ages from Portland, singing in Japanese. The beer robot. This is where you can swing with your lighter on. Oh, the beavers. Oh God. ADU. Oh God. How awesome. Thank you. I have nothing to do with the design. Okay, how do I go to here? All right. So it didn't end there. So Wyden Kennedy and Portland Travel Oregon team also came up with this tool called Vizio. And if you go to Travel Portland website and look for Ordinary Tube, there's a link, I think it's called ordinarytube.com. But when you go there, this is a homepage, and you can actually use your own face, a photo, and then embed it in some of the characters in the video. And people, for some reason, people do that in Japan nowadays. For some reason. But it's worth visiting, and it's really cool. So from now on, for those Japanese you may see on the street coming nowadays, may have seen this and expecting something like the beer robots and the blue Mr. Do's and all of that, and you have to kind of break the myth for them, you know? Kind of reach out to them and say, hey, by the way, that video wasn't really all that true, you know? Otherwise, they're like looking for things, you know? It's like, where's the blue man? So that may be nice for you to do that. And also, talking about the popularity, I have recently published a book called Portland. And it was out, I think it was published in May, the end of May, and it's in its fourth printing, reaching about 10,000 copies. So I'm on that fad too. But this book is about urban planning, urban development, economic development, trade, international trade, that kind of things. But it also talks about the history. And the history, not only the 40 years of our turnaround from the messy kind of environmental issues, but it goes deeper. It starts with the wagon days, the move to the west, and the gold mine, and all those days. I know some of you weren't alive, but some may, I don't know. So during it took me 2 years to write it. Because I work full time, and my boss didn't like me to write during the work, so I wake up early to write it, and it took 2 years to do that. And finally, it's out and it's popular. It's great, but I had this kind of nag in my mind that a lot of things I've written about the history of Oregon was cut during the editing. That was a lot of pages, maybe 60 pages, 50, 60 pages. That was just totally cut from the get-go. Mr. Yamazaki, too long, boring. Nobody likes it. But I wanted to tell the story because there's a really cool part of that Oregon history that nobody knows, or only a few people know. So I'm going to start that, and I have about maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 2 hours. So I want to tell you about this unsung hero called Ronald MacDonald. It's a story of a man who wanted to make a difference in his life, not by being hardworking, not by being a good Oregonian. No. It's the guy who just thought totally outside the box during his era and among his friends and family. And he did something incredible within his life of 40-some years. He died early. But this guy was alive during the 1800s. He was born, well, let me see. So let me go back to the original Oregon, Japan story. So the first Japanese to have arrived in the land of Oregon was this guy called Otokichi. Otto arrived when he was 14. He was actually a sailor from Western Japan, where he carried a lot of goods, the sake, miso, rice, some of the dishes and different things that they make in Western Japan. And they're supposed to put that on a ship and then travel to Tokyo, Edo, where the Japanese national government was. And they do that maybe every couple months to just give the big cheese, the goods that they can get in Eastern Japan. That was his job. His job was to manage the shipment. He's a logistical guy. During that time, Japan was closed. In fact, Japan was closed for 300 years. It's called sakoku. They totally shut down foreign influences whatsoever, except for one small island in the southern tip of Japan. Southern tip of Japan. So he was a hardworking guy, but his ship hit the storm. He's going upwards, so from it's like a Western Japan, Eastern Japan, he was going upwards. And then hit the storm. And it was so rough that he had to cut the mast in order for the ship to survive. And they started float on this stream of, it's an ocean stream called Kuroshio in Japanese, and that goes all the way to the Bailing, and then Alaska, and Washington, and Oregon. This guy ended up, there are 20-some people on the ship, but for that 18 months or so trip, many died because of because of lack of food, because of lack of water, lack of a lot of things. Many died, and only 3 people survived, and Otto was one of the 3. They landed in the Olympic Peninsula, Washington. There, the local indigenous people helped them out, landed, and then they were nice, but they enslaved them for a little while. And then, of course, during the time, little tribes talk about, oh yeah, these strange foreigners came one day, and we're using them as servants. And then talk. And all of a sudden, at the time, Oregon and Washington were part of the British territory, and people at the, what's the name of the company? The trading company, Hudson Bay, recognized that, oh, those must be Chinese, we can use them. So the men in charge of Hudson Bay basically look for those 3 poor Chinese people, they thought, and then bring them back to Fort Vancouver. So that was the first landing of Japanese into Oregon territory. I know Fort Vancouver is in Vancouver, Washington, but that was part of Oregon then. So he was taking the chief that took them in to Fort Vancouver. His name was John McLoughlin. And some of you know his name from Oregon City. That's where he retired. But he was the top dog, the superintendent of Hudson Bay Company. And he figured that they aren't Chinese, they're Japanese. But knowing the global trade through Hudson Bay, he recognized that maybe using these guys, returning these poor guys back to Japan, help Japan open up to trade with Britain. Good business person. So he took them, and then going by Hawaii, then Macau, and then took him back to London. I don't know why they didn't stop Japan, but there was a right already. So Otto was the first person to land in North America as Japanese, and then, well, one of the first ones. And then he was the very first one after somebody in 16th century to actually go to United Kingdom today. And he survived that, and then another ship took him and 2 others from London to Hong Kong, then to Japan. But Japan was still closed, and his ship was actually shot by the Japanese government, so he couldn't even land. But this, small towns in Oregon back then, basically villages. Of course, they all hear about this Japanese guys coming from Olympic Peninsula, and now they're living here, they learned English, and they're working a little bit, and they're taken by the Hudson Bay Company back to Europe. Of course, the story remains. And this is where Ronald MacDonald grew up. This is his picture. He was born in 1824 and in Fort Vancouver. His parents were Archibald MacDonald, Englishman, who was one of the managers at the Fort Vancouver, and mother, interestingly, was a Native American, Princess Raven. So, and it was common back then to intermix the races because there aren't a lot of people, and there was basically a lot of Europeans from different descents and Native Americans living together in harmony. So that wasn't all that uncommon, but it's uncommon to see the kind of a management class, high-class Englishman, to marry a princess of the native land. So he was born. He was taken care of, but soon after his birth, the princess, the mother, passed away. And Archibald remarried to an English girl, and she taken Ronald and another son of her own as her own to really raise them very well. They were educated, they had access to money and influence. They did well as part of the Hudson Bay Company. When Ronald was a teenager, he was sent to St. Thomas in Canada. That's far eastern Canada in Ontario. Very different atmosphere. At the time, eastern North America, basically represents big cities. So St. Thomas was big. Where he grew up in Fort Vancouver, tiny villages. He enjoyed learning banking industry, but for a while, but soon he realized that he doesn't look like the rest of the population. He felt odd being himself because he's a mixed blood, right? Majority of the towners there in St. Thomas will be white. And he didn't like the banking either. So he's gone through school, he's done well, he learned banking, but he remembered that Otto. I heard there's a country called Japan. There, people look like me, or kind of look like me, and they live in harmony with nature. It's a great land. So, after being hurt and bored at banking business, he made his dream to visit Japan one day. He knew it was a closed country. So, here's his dream. Beautiful, beautiful dream. Japan. So what he did next was remarkable. He actually found whaling ship. Back then, whaling was a big deal. The whale bladder was burned to make the fuel for the lamp, and that was the boom today. It's like the internet of back then, right? So he jumps on it saying, oh yeah, I can just get on it and then maybe go to Japan. So what's happening in the whaling industry at the time? Whales all over Pacific, especially between the Hawaiian Islands and Alaska. They go back and forth different seasons. But Americans like to abuse the system all the time. They over-whaled. And they started going further and further west. Where did they hit? Japan Sea. So the other side of Japan was just full of waves still. It's a bunch of whales. So some of the whalers just starting to go west and further west and further west. And now some of the ships are going to western part of Japan, Japan Sea. And then he heard that. And well-educated Ronald didn't spend any time wasting. He goes to the right ship. First ship take him to the Hawaiian island. And then there he found another ship that are going to Japan. And then he strike a deal with the captain, saying, all right, I'll give up all the proceeds from my work between here and Japan and back. And captain, you can have that. In exchange, I would like you to teach me how to navigate the ship and let me get off the ship closest to Japan. Crazy idea. The captain first refuses, but gives in. And then now, he made a deal. So when the ship gets really close to the northern island of Hokkaido, captain gave him a little boat. And there goes Ronald, just rowing off, getting closer and closer. But wave was pretty strong then. He actually made really close, but didn't get onto the Hokkaido island. He went to the next small island called Rishiri Island. There he saw this mountain, kind of looked like Mount Rainier, where he grew up, right? So he's like, oh yeah, that must be a good land. And he gets there. And he knew, studious Ronald, he knew that in the northern Japanese islands, there are indigenous people called Ainu. They are kind, they live in harmony with nature. They're very kind, they're very inclusive. So as he landed and pretended that he's a castaway, he's nearly dying. He had to flip the boat, lie on the beach for many hours until one of the Ainus realized that, oh, there's a person, we should help him out. So here he goes. He became friends with Ainu. By the time, the national government of Japan has an army in Ainu land too. So that you see the samurai on the right-hand side. The samurai guy is the manager of the land. And then Ainu guys are kind of like a quasi-slaves, unfortunately. Familiar stories. So you got to know them. And Ainu people are fine. They're feeding him and nice clothes and everything, enjoying. And Ronald's starting to learn Ainu and the Japanese with them. But then soon the managers of the land, the proper Japanese people came. And of course, having a foreigner is outlawed. So he has to report back to the central government. Oh my God, we have this foreigner, castaway, from somewhere we don't know. So Ronald soon had been taken on the ship to the only island that's available for external trade in the southern tip of Japan. That took many, many months. He was contained in a small box. Of course, during the time, he's studying Japanese. And once he got there, because he was educated, he knew the navigation, he knew the technology, and he was able to communicate in some broken Japanese. He wasn't taken into regular jail. He was taken into a house, and he was kind of house jailed for a while. But then people started to realize that, oh my God, he's from America. At the time, Japan wasn't trading with America or England. Japan was trading only with Portuguese and Netherlands, or the Holland. So those are the two languages that the translators / diplomats could speak. And they know the Americans are coming. American influence is coming via Macau to Japan, trying to force to open the trade channels. But nobody can communicate because nobody knows English in Japan. So Ronald, by accident, but by force, became the first English teacher in Japan. Oregonian from Astoria became the first English teacher in Japan. And let me remind you, Japan is the biggest trade partner and ally of the United States. Combine the two, this is the biggest economic connection you can imagine in the world. Who started the communication? It's Ronald MacDonald. Who knew? So he started teaching English with his broken Japanese. He started teaching English. One of the students, his name is Einosuke Moriyama, was very smart, very quick to learn. In his short stay of several months in this southern tip of Japan, house jail, Moriyama learned enough English to communicate, and they became best friends. But then, this guy called Commodore Perry, Matthew Perry, who started the effort to open up a trade channel with Japan, started to knock on the door in the southern tip of Japan, saying, "Hey, I demand, open the channel. By the way, you have several castaways from America that would like to collect." So Ronald was sent back to United States via, I think, Hong Kong. Then he actually went back doing different things in the East Coast US and in Europe. He became a logistician. He became a trading company. He did a lot of things. While he was enjoying his new life back in the United States and Europe, his student and best friend, Einosuke Moriyama, became the top ambassador, diplomat of Japan because he knew how to speak English. And when Commodore Perry visited for the third time, finally there was a communication in English, and he forcefully opened that door by threatening shooting at beaches and areas of Japan, and then showing the technology so advanced, because again, Japan was closed for 300 years. They didn't have guns until late. Big cannons were very threatening to Japanese. So Perry was successful in opening up parts of Japan, actually 3 or 4 ports, one of which was Yokohama. It was a fishing village, small fishing village, but that was Americans were allowed in to bring in goods and services from there, and then started trading with Tokyo. So the history changed. When that happened, and then many decades later, maybe 2-3 decades later, in a small farm in eastern Washington, Ronald passed away, actually at his young brother's farm. He passed away. His last word wasn't even a goodbye. He said, "Sayonara." He always dreamed of living and even dying in Japan. Today, the memories of his adventures are in many places. You can find that. So one is at the Fort Vancouver, and it's a plaque. And then let me skip ahead a few slides so I can show you. The other is in Rishiri Island near Hokkaido, big one here. And also a pair of those, I don't know if it's tombstone, but stones in the Kyushu, in the Dejima Island, where the trade was happening back then. And besides McDonald's is the Einosuke Moriyama, who became the top diplomat to open that trade. And just so you know, this is his handwriting. This is basically a dictionary, first English-Japanese dictionary of the world. He wrote this. So he knew exactly what X means and how to pronounce it, and that's how he kept up with his Japanese studies. And I want to touch on one thing. So I learned this story from one of the key players of Sapporo Portland Sister City Associations, and I asked this lady with the sunglasses, Michigoto. She told me a little bit about the story, and then a few other people have told me, but she gave me this book, Unsung Hero, which is written bilingually in Japanese and English, and I got to read this, and I also have read another book that's written in Japanese, but a very thick book about his story and U.S.-Japan or Oregon-Japan relations. And then I got really interested in learning more about it. So I've read maybe 3 or 4 books about him and kind of a history between the two lands. So I wanted to conclude with you, leaving you a few things to think about. So you thought, and how many people have been to Japan? And you thought you knew something about Portland, going to Japan. But it's over 100, 150, 170 years of history that's connecting us. And that small tie became basically like a stream of connection. A lot of people have gone back and forth. And now there are enough communications between the two locations. This has become a platform. And I play on a platform, and so do you. There are over 130 Japanese organizations and companies in Oregon and Southern Washington today. So I hope that more Oregonians, more Portlanders will travel to Japan, because there are many more Japanese travel here every day. There's one person behind the scenes there. He's visiting from Tokyo. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll take any questions. Oh, do I have time? Good. Any questions? Go ahead.
So what does the role, or does PDC play any role in kind of facilitating, you kind of briefly mentioned that Portland designers and the kind of demand for Portland culture products. Does PDC play much role, and is there anything you could specifically point people towards if they're looking for resources?
Yes. So Pop-Up Portland is an event, annual event, and we have to select. We have up to maybe 10 companies who can participate, but around that we have maybe 2-3 dozens of importers and buyers that have lined up in the past 3 years, and we know them personally. So if your product is of interest to any of them, we have direct ties that we can facilitate communication. We also have State of Oregon Japan office. That's full-time office, and you can work with them to look for distributors or buyers. And we also have, if you work with food items, then Department of Agriculture of Oregon helps with the food, so I don't touch food items, but they do that. There are many resources. So it's up to your business plan, your commodity, your projects, programs, and what do you want to do with it. But we know by the hundreds, we have contacts in Japan today. Go ahead.
The video we watched, where and when is that shown in Japan? Is it on television?
So it's on the internet. So it started as web project, but we launched the campaign at our event Pop-Up Portland in, was it May this year? Yeah. May this year in Tokyo. So we did that, and they had their own lunch. So we had our kind of lunch at our event, and then they have their own event downtown Tokyo in a very famous bookstore campus called T-Site. And it was at the same day. And when they launched it, they had, I don't know how many hundreds of hits on that. The PR campaign just went. So a lot of people just went after that. Web links and the articles and the videos and the Vizios and all that. So it's available on the web in Japanese already. And then there was a Japan travel trade show in September last month, and the blue guy, the Mr. Dude, the costume showed up, and it was also a big hit, and it was publicized heavily in Japan and a little bit in Portland. So it's gone, and then it's a year or two plan, so they're gonna press forward and keep pushing that campaign, and all the partners help.
How did you get connected to Portland personally?
How did I? Interesting story. So I've been here for 4.5 years, and I was an economic development planning consultant based in San Antonio, Texas. I worked for a company in Austin, so the company was based in Austin, but I travel all over US to work with agencies like Portland Development Commission and then give them how to basically develop a long-term plan. And I was that consultant. And one of my clients at the time was Cowlitz County, Washington. And I have to land in Portland, and then drive up there. And I kind of fell in love with the town. It was beautiful, it was sunny, it was summer. And it was just wonderful. And food was great, people were weird, and it was so liberal. And then I basically wanted to live here. So it took about 2 years to find a job. And I moved in 2012. And economic development by training, Japanese, it's easy to live here, and got economic development job, and I started promoting Portland in Japan. And what got me to really step into Japan from Portland was that export plan. So PDC had it with regional partners, the state of Oregon, Port of Portland, and many other people were involved in it, but somebody has to take a lead and actually do it, right? The plan is beautiful, but you got to do it to make sure that happens. So that was my job when I got the job at PDC. And I haven't regretted. Any other questions? Okay.
What's your favorite part of Portland?
Favorite part?
Specific place or thing to do that you don't tell other people?
So there's a reason for what I like. Why I like is, so I grew up in the northern part of the Tokyo region, and the town that I grew up in sits between ocean and a mountain, kind of like Portland. And I grew up basically playing in the ocean in the summer and then playing in the mountain in the winter. I grew up skiing, but I've been in US for 21 years, and for the last 16 years of my life in Portland, I was in the south, far away from the mountains. So I really take every advantage to go to the mountain. So I like hiking, I like skiing here. And it's a couple hours away, you can choose, and it's great. I love the coast too, but I think because of because I missed mountains for over a decade, I'm kind of in love with the mountains here. I take my kids there all the time. And the food. You can't beat the food in Portland. It's so fresh. Mr. Briscoe.
Food question for you.
Yes.
So there's been a lot of exchange of ramen.
Yes.
Which is super important, but maybe a little saturated now. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the potential for okonomiyaki to come into
So saturation doesn't happen until you have kind of like if ramen noodle shop start outnumbering coffee shop, then that's a saturation. Because we have that many ramen shops in Japan. I mean, I wouldn't say every corner, but every district has one. It's very many. So we only have several today. And the town of, the metro area of 1.5, 2 million people, we can handle a couple hundred more. I think people in Portland will enjoy that. But at least 10 more, that would be great, so we can choose from, About the okonomiyaki, I think there's a food cart that serves okonomiyaki, is that right? Or maybe takoyaki.
The takoyaki place
Takoyaki. Closed.
Oh.
Good job, Portland.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was their fault. But okonomiyaki is a Japanese pancakes. It's savory. It's got different things in it. You can have pork or shrimp or seafood in general or anything. But it's very healthy. It can be heavy if you cook it in a way. It can have cheese in it. But I think it can be a good hit. But nobody has taken the risk to do it.
Bamboo Sushi has it.
They do?
Yeah, but it's not as good as...
Because they try to make it everything sustainable.
We need a genuine Japanese import, so maybe for 2017, something in the plan.
Sure, piece of cake. Now I would like to work on that. I actually have a lot of inquiries from Japanese kind of property developers and kind of business associations to bring more authentic Portland food So that's on my list to do. So if you know of anything that's really hip and nice and could make money in Japan, I would like to know. Donuts saturated.
I'm curious, there's such a variety of food in Portland. What do you consider authentic Portland food?
Authentic, probably for Japanese eyes, is something that they don't have, they haven't seen. And in Portland is good at creating something new or something kind of twisted and weird. So, I think the donuts are great, pancakes are great, and then for some reasons the Navar has done well in Tokyo. And then we've also had twist of McCormick and Schmick's, right, called Oregon Bar and Grill, downtown Tokyo. That's survived well. Is it still open?
No, it's going to close because the landlord wants a steakhouse there. But we're trying to talk them into opening up
Another location. Many others. But beer, so there's a PDX tap room in downtown Tokyo that's doing very well. I know 2 Oregon wine bars, coffee shops that only buys from Stumptown roasted coffee. There are many, many things. So I'm looking for the second wave until they get tired of Portland and they move on to San Diego or something, Yeah. Or Denver. Yes.
So you talk about wanting people to visit Japan from Portland. Do you have any recommendations of places that somebody should visit? For instance, like me, anybody that's not very familiar with Japanese culture.
So I think the Tokyo and Kyoto are the must, like on the first visit. So you get to experience the biggest metro area in the world, and it's very sophisticated, clean, safe, and then a lot of parts are messy, but in order. It's kind of crazy. And then Kyoto is the older capital, and it's the World Heritage Site as a city, and it has over 2,000 temples and shrines, and some are as old as 300. It's like 1,500 years old, whatever, and it's still standing. Some are rebuilt, some are original, and then you can tell it's really, really cool. You will need like a week in each location to fully enjoy what it is about these towns. And then my personal recommendation is go out and enjoy the hot springs in the nature. You can actually have outside hot springs looking down the mountains or rivers. It's pretty common in the countryside. And I worked in one of the national parks in Japan called Nikko. And if you go to Nikko and enjoy that very natural outside onsen, you get to bathe with monkeys. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty awesome. So I recommend that. But you can buy Lonely Planet and just check out everything. That's also easier. But it's a big country if you think about it. Yes. Any other questions? And you're welcome to check out the publications here. And I'll be here for a little bit.
All right. We return on November 1st with Intisar Abioto, photographer, dancer, explorer, with her talk, Black Portlands. In this talk, Intisar will dive into creative discoveries behind her recently published zine, Black Portlands. She's continually interested and inspired by the multiple histories and presence of Black creative life in Portland. For this publication and mini project, she photographed and interviewed Black creatives across disciplines about their creative journeys in Portland. Many lessons were learned in the process, many insights found. She'll share in-depth on the lessons learned from the interviews and the many creative illuminations found along the way. So it should be really exciting. So come in 2 weeks and let's have another round of applause for Mitsuhiro Yamazaki. Come up and check out some books. There's some beers. Hang out for a little bit. Make yourself comfortable.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice talking to you.